Kia ora, good evening. Invercargill prison was locked down this morning after an unidentified white powder was found in a letter opened by a staff member in the prison's administration block. Emergency services were called to the prison just after 8:30 this morning, including 23 fire service operational personnel who isolated the envelope and decontaminated prison staff. 3 prison administration staff were put through a decontamination process as a routine precaution. Police say there was no potential or immediate danger to other staff, prisoners or the public, and the block was soon cleared, with staff being allowed to return to work. The substance will be analysed, but it's not known how long results will take. Stage 5 of the Stadium Southland rebuild is being slashed in the hopes of saving millions of dollars ahead of a meeting with insurers. The rebuild of Stadium Southland has been slow, fraught with delays, earthquake codes and budget constraints. Now, Stadium Indoor Leisure Centre Trust Deputy Chair Alan Dennis says the Trust is preparing to modify Stage 5 of the build in the hopes of saving around $3 million. Relocating the administration block to the ground floor will sacrifice potential rents from offices, but is seen as a prudent move by the Trust, who are now waiting to meet with NZI to see how much of the rebuild costs can be recouped. The extent of damage in Wellington was being examined today following yesterday's 6.5 magnitude quake 20 kilometres east of Seddon. People were advised to stay out of the CBD until at least midday today to allow engineers and building owners to check for damage. Emergency Management Southland Manager Neil Cruikshank says the organisation is on standby if needed.
Just speaking with the Ministry of Civil Defence mainly, just to see, look, if there's help, what would it be and when do you need it by? But at the moment they've said no, the Wellington councils and Civil Defence are handling things pretty well.
So tell me about what they're doing up in Wellington, your counterparts. What kind of work are they doing today?
Well, they'll really be coordinating the building assessments, and that'll be mainly done by structural engineers and building control staff from the councils. So they'll be going around looking at the buildings, saying, look, where do they think they are as far as needing further assessment? Are they okay? And if they're not, what are they going to do about them?
What kind of damage is likely from a quake of this magnitude?
Well, it really depends. It's a fair bit depends on the age of the buildings, the location of the buildings, what's underneath them. If it's good hard rock, then it's not normally so bad. But then there can be reclaimed land. So there's a lot of factors come into play. Really, you can have one building beside another, and one could be badly damaged, the other isn't.
How long would it likely take to get through all of this work?
Well, that's the big unknown at the moment, and that's why we're sort of on standby. If it all goes well, it could be a number of days. But if there's buildings that are structurally unsound, then it could be quite a difficult process to get the CBD back up and running and things like that.
Now, in terms of the amount of damage, it is early days in terms of knowing what's happened. But do you think we've got off quite lightly in that area?
Well, you'd probably expect most of the buildings to perform the way they have. It's not the big earthquake that we quite often talk about, but it is a substantial earthquake in saying that, and the buildings are expected to stand up to it, but it's just some of that finer damage that can be caused. Yeah.
Now, is there a lesson here for Southland?
Oh yeah, look, I think as a message here for all New Zealanders is, that we've shown in the last couple of years now that, we're an earthquake country. That's definitely not going to change. Southland's got a good history of earthquakes. We know that the Alpine Fault, there's a 30% chance of that in the next 50 years being a very big earthquake. So, people just need to be prepared. That's the underlying message.
Teen drivers on restricted licences are proving high risk on the roads, with a quarter crashing and a good majority breaking restricted licensing rules, according to an Otago University study. The 5-year study of 900 teenage drivers shows 25% crashed while on restricted licence, while almost 2/3 breached licence conditions by driving unsupervised at night. More than 80% drove unsupervised with passengers, and 62% broke both rules. New Zealand has the highest road death rate in the OECD for 15 to 17-year-olds and the 4th highest for 18 to 20-year-olds. Thousands of people have flocked to the annual ILT Kids Zone Festival, with the first 5 days of the event selling out. Close to 11,000 people attended the festival, held over 6 days at James Hargest College in Invercargill. The event's been running for 9 years and draws people from around the province and other parts of New Zealand. The festival has around 170 activities, and Festival Director Laura Russell describes this year's event as brilliant, saying the weather couldn't have been better. She says next year's festival will have some special surprises to celebrate 10 years. Stay with us after the break, how the efforts of two groups are bringing down possum numbers in the south. Welcome back. Possum numbers in the south are well down thanks to two militant pest control programs that are creating impressive results. The Possum Control Area program was developed to monitor and control possum numbers, while TB-free Southland has been working to eradicate infected possums. Environment Southland coordinates the Possum Control program, working with farmers. First introduced to New Zealand in 1837 to establish a fur trade, possum numbers quickly spread, and with it tuberculosis. In the past 20 years, Southland's seen a gratifying drop in TB herd numbers, from 56 to just 2, thanks to TB-free Southland, who undertake the initial eradication process. To keep numbers down, possum control areas are established by Environment Southland.
As those programs fall off the TB program, because there's no risk there anymore, we try and take them up within the first 2 to 3 years before the possums get a chance to build up again. And farmers, as I say, want to keep the possum numbers down, and there's also a reduced risk of TB associated with that as well.
Currently, the program covers 150,000 hectares, with hopes to expand the program by 50,000 hectares a year. Some areas not feasible to bait due to terrain and habitat are left to trappers seeking fur and skin. And because Crown land isn't bound by the regional pest strategy, pest control is causing issues in some areas.
Ideally, we'd like to see a network of bait stations along that Crown boundary, which would stop or get possums as they move out of the main Crown estate habitat and come out to feed on the farmland. So ideally, those bait stations would be baited at least once a year, if not twice a year.
Bait-shy possums learn a few tricks over their average 9-year lifespan, so tactics change to keep them interested. Options include a range of poisons, including biodegradable strips laced with peanut butter nailed to trees. Anticoagulant brodifacoum is also popular, taking up to 20 days for hemorrhaging to take effect.
We provide the initial control initially to make sure that the possums are down to a low level throughout the PCA area. And as part of that control, we also set up a network of possum bait stations, and then the farmer takes responsibility for using those bait stations in subsequent years.
Keeping numbers down is the aim of the PCAs rather than total eradication, saving precious crops and pastures which possum are known to devour.
The main benefits are the economic benefit to the farmer. Possums aren't eating kale crops, swede crops, pasture, trees. There's a social benefit of not having possums running around your roof and eating your rose garden. Roses is one of their favourite fruit supplies if they can get it. And just basically the benefit to the environment through biodiversity.
The program costs around $500,000 a year to run. Margot Sutherland, South Today News. The Reserve Bank is considering introducing loan restrictions to help moderate house price inflation pressures. If the loan-to-value ratio policy was introduced, it would restrict the numbers of loans banks can approve with deposits of less than 20%. Labor Party finance spokesman David Parker says a 20% deposit would really hurt first home buyers, particularly in Auckland.
Let's say they're on $60,000 per annum and they're in KiwiSaver and they're saving $3,000 per annum. Their contribution to KiwiSaver, 3% per annum, their contribution from a $60,000 earnings would be $1,800 per annum. So you can see it would take an extra 5 years to even save $10,000 through your KiwiSaver account. So this will really hurt first home buyers.
What do you think we should do instead then?
Well, we think that we need to do two things. The government needs to introduce a capital gains tax so that the speculators are the ones that are pushed to the side, not first home buyers. Because the first home buyers wouldn't be affected by a capital gains tax, but it would take the heat out of the property market. Secondly, we think the government needs to roll up its sleeves and build a few affordable houses. Most of the houses that have been built in Auckland are large houses. There's less money, less of a profit margin for the builders in smaller houses, and so they're not building them. And so the government should roll up its sleeves and get behind KiwiBuild, which is another Labor Party proposal.
For those of us in the provinces, we might argue that essentially we're all going to be paying for Auckland's housing problem. What would you say to that?
Well, the KiwiBuild program isn't subsidised housing. Some of the other parties are proposing subsidised housing, but we're not in the Labor Party. We're saying that the government should use its muscle to bring forward economies of scale with large numbers of smaller, more affordable houses, but they will be passed on at their full cost, including the cost of the Crown's interest. So there is no subsidy there.
Now, in terms of people being able to use KiwiSaver, there's been some changes put forward around using KiwiSaver to address the new housing proposal. What are your thoughts there?
Well, it's somewhat ironic, isn't it? Because, you know, the National Party now say the biggest answer to housing problems in New Zealand is KiwiSaver, which they opposed when Labor introduced it. So we find that ironic. I think it is good that people save through KiwiSaver and can use their contributions to put towards their first home. But we shouldn't rob all of our retirement savings for housing. We should actually be able to do both in New Zealand. If the economy's running well, if there are the jobs there and wages are good, then people can afford to both save and own a house, as they do, used to in yesteryear and do still in places like Invercargill.
Local government and declining membership were among the topics being discussed at Grey Power Southland's annual general meeting in Invercargill this afternoon. More than 80 people were at the Southland Grey Power annual general meeting at the Ascot Park Hotel today. President Jeff Pearcey addressed the room, saying he thinks the really significant issues are superannuation, health, energy and local government reorganisation. He also spoke of Grey Power having lost half its membership and encouraged members to get others to join. While guest speaker Labor Party finance spokesman David Parker talked about power prices and told attendees the electricity pricing model needs to change so people pay less. And that is it from News Tonight. Coming up in sport, Super 15 playoff action from the news crew. Good night.